As we talked about last week, this Lenten journey, which the Lord invites us into the wilderness of our own lives, of our own heart, and speak to us at a place where our heart is, the deepest core of who we are. And that's frankly scary because it stirs up things deeper than we've ever known, that we could imagine is possible, and definitely uncomfortable. And it raises those fears and anxieties. And as we go deeper into this pandemic, we know more people who are sick, infected, who are dying, who are anxious, who are homeless, who don't have, especially the poor, who don't have a lot of resources we do, or who are away without loved ones. And as we entered more deeply into this season of epidemic, we discover more and more we need hope. There's so much distress. My aunt, who is a Colombian nun in Verona, northern Italy, um, she lives in a community of 130 people. She's a nurse, so she's in the front line. And recently, one of the cooks in their huge mother house of 130 has coronavirus. So they shut down the whole kitchen for the whole month. And now they have to find other ways of feeding these sisters who are over 70s, many of them. And now how many of them are going to be sick? We don't know. And so during this time, as we're led into deeper into the desert of our life, deeper into our own very heart, we need more hope than ever. And so today we'll talk about this embracing hope, and yet hope is elusive, you know. Unlike faith, which is a relationship, even though we do struggle with relationship and with God, we know what that's like. Or love. Yes, love is not easy, but at least we know that in some way that love is this self-giving, fulfilling way of connecting and relating. But hope is elusive because, you know, because we desperately want to believe and hang on to clutch to something right now for security, for safety. We hang on to whatever is hopeful, whatever we think is hope is. And the definition of hope looks like expectation, which literally, the Webster Dictionary, hope is a feeling of expectation, a desire for a certain thing to happen, that something good will happen in the future. And so I want to make this distinction between expectation and hope, because expectation is really a focus on outcomes and what we should do to achieve those desired results. I need an A, I need to study hard, I need a good job, I find the right connection, the right network, I prepare for my interview, write a resume, name drop, expectations. But hope is not a focus on outcome or even focus on what I need to do. Hope is a focus on the goodness and the capacity of the divine one to provide regardless of the outcome. That's why in the old terminology, we call it trust in God's divine providence, that God will provide even though we do not know how and why. So expectation is grabbing, it's flinching, and it's fighting so we can get those masks, so we can get all the supplies that we think before other people get it. And we expect things will get better. And hope more like this. So maybe another distinction sometimes we think of hope is most of us that think of that hope is optimism. So I would try to say that hope is not optimism, because optimism is focused on a future that can be better and is based on my imagination, my capacity to believe or even to carry it out. But hope is I rely, so optimism is I wish that, but hope is I rely on God's goodness that, or I trust in your promise, God, that. It's more like that. And oftentimes for optimism, we think that, or pessimistic people can't be hopeful. That only optimistic people are hopeful. But that's not true, because a lot of time when we look at optimism, we think it's like a fireworks. We think it needs to be bright, it needs to be um, clear results, obvious work, like an diffuser fire. That song "Lighting Up the Sky." But really, hope oftentimes it's more like the embers at the end of a night in a fireplace, or the pilot light, just enough to ignite your furnace. Because even with amber fire, you may not see it, it's there. When you get near, you feel the warmth. And when you put kindling or paper into it, it erupts into warmth and light and fire. So there's something laboring beneath, something at work in the amber within hope that we do not know, that effusive optimism is not there. So that's why Pope Francis talks that optimism disappoints, but hope does not disappoint. And at the heart of the difference between expectation and hope, and optimism and hope, is really trust. And you know this imagery, right? We clutch to something that we want, our teddy bear, our security. We love it, we need it. But then the Lord asks us, hey, could I take that? Could I have that? And we don't see what's behind this big teddy bear. And so for me these days, I feel out of control. None of us are very in control. In fact, I've labored for all my life an illusion of control. And now it's going. And I still want to clutch to it. And I find myself reacting or going back to old patterns of needing control. And I talked about last time that befriending anxieties and loneliness and helplessness is really hard, especially when I'm with people who I love, who are suffering. And I want to cling to this sense of control, but it doesn't give me life. It's no longer helpful. It's like that small gift. But I know that, and I cling to it. And as St. Ignatius and many saints says, all is gift, obvious or disguise with God. And God gives us gifts. God allows things to happen, fears, anxieties, catastrophes, to draw us closer to God. And so the gift, any gift in our life, is meant to draw us to the giver, to the one whose goodness will provide. But it's hard for us because we want to dictate what the gift look like. We want to take the cup that we altered, not the cup that's offered. And so that we struggle with the Mary Oliver quote from last week, no? Someone I love once gave me a box full of darkness, not chocolate. And it took me years to understand that this is a gift. So in these days, there's going to be so much unexpected gift, including difficulty and our own struggle and those deep things, unfreedom, things we are stuck with, that comes up. And oftentimes it's our image of God. Our God is too small. Our God is punitive. And even the idea of the divine reset, maybe it is, but it's not. Is it really God punishing? And so hope be hope strips away our reliance on ourselves and help us to confront, who do I really imagine God to be, and how is God in my life? Little tiny, under my control, under my purview, under my direction, under my control, For God is an infinite, much bigger being than I've ever known, drawing my feet to places I've ever known. And hope does that. And the saints talk also the image of hope. Hope is like an anchor. It anchors the soul and steadies the heart. And you know what an anchor does, right? So here you have the boat underwater and it's stormy and it's wavy. But the anchor is dropped and it goes deep into the ground, into the depth of the sea. And even as the boat is turned topsy-turvy, goes around, it only goes around the circle, anchored, feathered by that anchor. And so even as the vicissitudes of life, even the storms of life batter us, even our inner turmoil more than ever raises, even our fear surmounts, hope like this anchor. We will not be completely lost at sea, even though we are battered by the storm. As I mentioned, fears up here, anxieties up here, but hope can anchor us to a sense much deeper, so that the fears and the anxieties still happen, but the steady undercurrent of grace of life continues. Unseen anchor, hope anchors. Unseen hope is like an ambering light giving fire and warmth without even us seeing and knowing, understanding. It's easy to say that, but there are times in which life is so tough that we come against what Abraham, our forefather, our foreparent faith, talks about, hoping against hope. And what is this story from Abraham? So Abraham was 100 years old, and he and his wife Sarah had a comfortable, very good life. And they're asked to be uprooted, to raise their anchor and go elsewhere into the promised land. Along the way, it wasn't easy. And he's promised descendants more than more than the sands in the sea. And then he has a son with the Hagar, the servant girl, but she's dismissed because of jealousy in the family. And now he can't imagine, how could I be descendants to many when I don't have a son? So he goes into the night, and it's pitch dark night, like the picture that you see, only some stars. And he, with his friendship with the Lord, complains. But a complaint among good friends, a complaint not just giving God blah, 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 and then leaving, but sharing his heart, his fears, his anxieties, and then staying to listen for a response. And Abraham says this, look, you made me this promise, but how is this going to happen? I have no heir to continue my progeny. And God says to him, trust me, look up, look up, and look at the stars and count them one by one. As many as you can count, your descendants will be greater. And this scene takes place at night. It's dark outside, it's dark in his own heart, the darkness of disappointment, of discouragement, of difficulty. And he struggled against hope, against expectation, against optimism for the impossible. And all he has is his promise of a friend. So God teaches Abraham and us to see with the eyes of faith, to look at some stars in our life against a darkened sky, hoping against hope. And so Christian hope is not us walking some better future which may very well be, but as Pope Francis says, Christian hope is having the confidence that I am already walking towards something that is, not something that I hope may be. So already the confidence that I have of the one who loves me, the one who's with me, the one who's promised to give me greater life, more than I've ever known. And that with this promise, with this anchor, confidence, trust, I walked into the unknown. So then hope is not looking towards the future, but paying attention to what is already here, the ordinary and the extraordinary, and then walking into the future. Hope is what remains when expectations and optimism fades away. And so at the heart of it, Christian hope is a trusting in the abiding love and promise of God. Let me ask you, has God ever promised you something God has not kept? Now, sure, there's a lot of things we think God should promise us, especially now, taking care of our loved ones, getting this epidemic passed. And yes, like Pope Francis, we should pray, and we need to pray for the end of pandemic. We need to pray for healing of everyone. But are we going to focus on what we want, or are we going to let that be an opportunity to trust the one whose promise is always true and who has the power even beyond our capacity to understand and to notice right now? Because our story is part of a much bigger story. Our story right now, in the global story, is not good. It's like it's horrible, and it's going to get worse, at least in terms of sickness and social distancing and wearing masks when we go outdoors. I have some very good friends in my life, younger than me, Jesuits, who passed away or who left the community. It's not easy. I have this good friend, TJ Martinez, a rising star in the Jesuits. In 6 months, lung cancer, never smoked, died. He ran Cristo Rey High School in Houston for disadvantaged youth. And before he died, he called the whole community together, the whole school community, and he says, he says, look, my story is not going well right now. And your story may not go well. And your story may not begin well. But I believe that my story will end well. And that your story will end well. Because your story and my story is part of a bigger story. It's a story of God's love for each of us. The story of Jesus. The story of God's response to human suffering by entering into the muck and the mess. And accompanying us and showing us that God suffers and that there's life beyond that. So that our story is the story, the mystery of the Christian faith, the mystery of Easter. And the promise is the Lord is with us as we walk with the Lord, as we unite our cross with his. We will share new life with him. St. Francis of Assisi recommend a prayer before the crucifix. And the crucifix is good. You see Jesus' body. That's been very helpful to me these days. Because as I mentioned, I still feel like a yo-yo back and forth. I can't be settled. I can't settle. I can't get into the heart of prayer. And so I look at the cross, and St. Francis of Assisi says, imagine Jesus on the cross, and you're standing right at the base and you can touch him. And the cross in the Lucid Chapel that I look every day, and particularly after Mass. And St. Francis of Assisi says, imagine Jesus coming down on the cross a little bit, and he embraces you and he draws you up, and you're so close to him, you can smell his blood. You could feel his heaving breath. You can almost feel the piercing thorn on his head. And St. Francis of Assisi says, let your pain, let your suffering, let your anxiety, let your fear and helplessness be joined with Jesus and let his pain and suffering be with yours. Let this love story together intertwine. This has been so helpful for me, even though I don't really know how to pray these days. Christian hope, trusting in his abiding love and promise of God, a God who suffers. If you read today's gospel, Jesus doesn't go into Holy Week trying to conquer. He does social distancing. He goes to a faraway place away from the crowd. Read it, he does that. And he acknowledges his weakness. He doesn't go into there like a superhero. He goes in there like, me too. Yes, me too. Whatever you go into, me too. And it's okay. I'm with you. You're with me. We can go through this together. Christian hope, trusting in the abiding love and promise of God. And then this process of going to the cross with the Lord, this process of defending fears, we get to the heart of the matter. And it's like this journey of embracing hope, going through our fears and our attachments and our unhealthy coping mechanism and our small imagination and image of God. It's like peeling an onion. It's risky because what happens when you peel an onion? First, you cry. Yes, you cry out loud, you cry within. Even if you put the onion in water, you still cry, no? And then, unlike an apple, when you peel and then you get to the core, the onion, there's no core. It's like hollow, it's empty. So we're like, oh my gosh, if the big fear is if I go through this whole process of this stripping away, this Lenten drawn deeper into the passion of Christ, what if there's nothing there? What if the universe is an accident, a work of evolutionary biology of chance? But whether that's true or not, we know that this time of suffering, this time of difficulty is a peeling away and revealing what is essential. What is superfluous will pass. What's essential will remain. What's at the heart of the matter? And the heart of the matter is we feel empty, we feel helpless. But the heart of the matter is, wait, maybe in that emptiness, in that empty core of the onion, beyond the tears, there is a hope beyond hope. There's a presence, more ordinary, more gentle, more tender, deeper than I've ever known before. Spirit of God, take me to a deeper place that my feet can take me. And so this stripping away. And so how do we enter this hope? By the willingness to be surprised. Because to embrace hope is to be open to being surprised. Surprised by what? Surprised by the ordinary, surprised by the extraordinary. And you and I have been surprised a lot. People connecting, families communicating, caring for each other, people making masks. There's a woman in her own house making masks. My mom is making masks. In Europe and parts of the United States, Catholic churches and Catholic schools are opening their institutions for healthcare workers to rest there so they don't go home and infect their family, and the homeless to stay. There's so much surprises that comes. Yes, the difficulty is still there, but so are the surprises. And our openness to these surprises will welcome hope. Pope Francis talks about hope as a doorway into the future. And so what surprise do? It creates opportunities. The gift of the pandemic is not in the sickness. The gift of social distancing, of self-isolation is not in the distancing or in the isolation. It's in the opportunity. Opportunity for what? Opportunity for peeling away for what's essential to reveal. Opportunity for deep healing, healing of our world. We know that our world is less polluted in the past 3 weeks. We know we are revealed that opportunity to care for our earth more, to care for one another more. Opportunity that opens the door into a new future. Is it the new normal? Not yet. But maybe the new normal will be our attentiveness to the poor, our attentiveness to the weak, and our attentiveness to our Mother Earth, our common home. And so, and again, this doorway is not a destination. It's not an arrival. It is an entering. It is a threshold. It is a going through. The cross is not the end. It's the bridge in which we go through. And so is suffering. Because optimism is focused on the end point. Opportunity and hope helps us to enter through the door. And so one good way is beauty. You and I think what's beautiful is what we're used to, but actually there's so much beauty around us beyond what we think is normal. John O'Donohue says this: beauty, we feel alive when we're in the presence of beauty, because it doesn't touch our eyes and our heart and our feeling, it touches our souls. Surprising beauty, unexpected beauty, and beauty inseparable from the fragility of life. And grief and gratitude go together. They do. And look at this photo. You see the crack in the leaf? The crack in the leaf allows the light behind it to shine through. Even though I can't settle, there's little moments in my day. The joke of my Jesuit brothers doing house chores and cleaning pots and pan, joking with my Jesuit brothers, doing elbow high five. These little moments of beauty and little smile, opportunities. And hope offers this opportunity. So let me close with Pope Francis' quote. To Christians, the future does have a name, and its name is hope. Feeling hopeful doesn't mean to be optimistically naive and to ignore the tragedy humanity is facing. Hope is the virtue of a heart that doesn't lock itself into darkness, that doesn't dwell in the past, doesn't simply cope or get by in the present, but is able to see tomorrow. Hope is the door that opens into the future, because the one who loves us has walked into greater life, into greater healing, into greater realization of what is most important. As elusive as hope is, this is the season as we enter into Holy Week for this. And we talked about last week, something happens, so that the dynamic of fear and hope is something happens, bad, suffering, fear, and we go to flight or fight, two extremes. We either go into denial or we go into a giving in, a surrender without taking responsibility. There's a middle way. That's the way of hope, the way of befriending fear, letting things be, but embracing what is deeper, this elusive and yet anchoring door opening hope, which is what? God's promise, God's presence, God's tenderness to suffer with us and for us. And God and Jesus, who's gone first, we follow his coattail, hanging, clinging tight to him. So the question I leave for us today, and we're going to go into prayer, how am I letting expectations go of others, of myself? And how allowing myself to be surprised by the simple, ordinary, by the extraordinary.